Just outside Vice President Vance's event was a protest organized by a local grassroots organization, Indivisible Bangor. Among those in attendance were Democrats currently campaigning who agreed fraud should be investigated, but that cutting funds is not the way. I was outside alongside Colin Gallagher to hear more from the demonstrators.
I heard J.D. Vance is coming out. It's like, he ain't coming out without hearing us complain about it. We don't want him here.
I think that it's really important that there's a very visible and very audible opposition to what's happening in the country right now.
We have one message for J.D. Vance. Hate has no home here. Democracy will prevail.
Vice President Vance coming here is not something to celebrate. They've taken the country in the completely wrong direction with an illegal war in Iran. The economy's upside down. People can't afford to even buy gas anymore.
This is not about fraud. This is about power.
I am the state auditor, and we investigate matters of fraud. The allegations of fraud, I think, are certainly not something we see in an institutional basis. And the Department of Human Services has its own internal audit function, which has indicated some misuse of funds, but nothing widespread or systemic.
All of us are committed to cracking down on fraud wherever it occurs.
We understand that fraud happens, and it happens in many states. The fact that they've decided to come here to talk about fraud is because of the dust-up that he had with our Governor Mills.
Nobody agrees with fraud, waste, and abuse, and that should be investigated. But what the solution is not is to take away health care from thousands of Mainers who desperately need it.
Remember, J.D. Vance just cut off funding for Medicaid in California, just as he's done in Minnesota, trying to punish blue states unlawfully, cutting off health care for millions of Americans. What he's talking about is trying to create a specter to scare people and to take their attention off what's really hurting Mainers, and that is this illegal war that's driving up gas prices and the crackdown on our civil liberties.
We really need to focus on the things that are important, which is affordability and voting rights and our ability to be a democracy.